In large organizations, when they've kind of operationalized their development process, the kind of things they typically don't spend enough time on are really just a couple of the steps. The very beginning, putting your time in at the beginning to really sink into the problem space, to even do some things that are not traditional, to ask other people in the world to give you input and to look for inputs in non-traditional ways. Companies will focus often on users, which is great. And back in the 90s, we focused on user-centered design. Back in the 80s, user-centered design. That was good because people hadn't been thinking about users enough prior to that. But unfortunately, we still had lots of terrible things produced. People would go to their office and they'd use some terrible program to file their expenses, for example. They're the users, but the users didn't buy it. The person who bought it was a different department, often a department like an accounting department who approved it, and they're not the people that travel or have to expense things all the time. And while it worked technically for these people, people don't like it. So now we have to think about the different people and organizations that are involved really in the design process. Instead of doing user-centered design, I think the more important way to think about this is stakeholder-centered design. So what that means is the stakeholder can be the person using it, the person buying it. It could be a whole bunch of other groups as well. It could be anywhere from a competitor can be a stakeholder in your product because they might respond to your product differently. And as you launch something, you might have to get ready for a competitive threat. Often, if we think about that more rich and complex network, we can design something that's much stronger, allows us to leverage the core things that we do well as a company, helps us understand when to buy either technologies or solutions or services that strengthen the offering and be able to produce something that really works well for people. And that's what we saw happen a lot after the iPhone came out. People started demanding that the IT software they use at work was as easy to use as an iPhone. So I think an important distinction that a designer has to make and an organization has to make when they're producing something is to differentiate between boundaries and hazards. And we can go into a situation knowing a boundary where we might be limited by something. It could be laws. We want to be able to launch a service in a certain country, and the laws prevent us from doing that. How do we get around that boundary? That could be by using someone to help change the laws, for example. Different than a hazard. A hazard is something that can go wrong. Even if we make a great product or solution, something could go wrong. How do we either prevent that from happening or enable people to recover from it? So if you make a great car, it can still be in an accident. So people started doing things like designing seatbelts and airbags to things that would lessen the impact, lessen that hazard. And now with AI, we can do something even better. The car can avoid the accident to begin with.